We believe that being a defender requires more than building shooting skills on a range. It's also a development of the heart, mind, body, and spirit. Join us as we explore what it truly means to be a defender in your training and in your everyday life. Welcome to Defenders Live. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Defenders Live. I'm your host, Laura Thorson. I am glad to be with you again on a Wednesday evening. Thank you so much for tuning in tonight. I will be having a special guest on tonight, Kyle Schmidt. I'm looking forward to this interview. Kyle was a police officer for almost 25 years, 24 years and 7 months, I think he said. And he was also a firearms instructor for some time in that department. He's also been a competitive shooter since 1999 in a variety of shooting disciplines. And his most recent national championship was in 2019. He's also a two-time world champion, although he's very humble about it. We're going to get into the details a little bit later and dive more into his background shortly. But first, if you're new or watching this as a replay, welcome. We're so glad you're here. Please drop in the comments where you're watching from. We always want to hear from you. And don't forget that we're going to have a live Q&A at the end of the broadcast with Kyle. So if a question pops into your head at any time during the broadcast, just put that in the comments and we'll gather those at the end of the broadcast. We've also got Adam Winch, the founder of Defenders USA, behind the scenes helping me tonight. Thank God for Adam Winch. If you see him pop on the screen from time to time, don't be alarmed. That's what he does. And he may have comments or questions during Kyle's interview as well. A special announcement that I want to run over with you guys really quick before we get any deeper into the interview is that we are now officially on almost 10 podcasting platforms. So that includes Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, iTunes, anywhere you can go to find podcasts. You can find Defenders Live now. We just posted the first ever 5 episodes that we did on those platforms. So be sure to go there, check that out, and leave us a review if you like what you hear. Also, if you don't want to miss any upcoming shows, you can sign up for email notifications at defenders-live.com. Be sure to sign up for those so you don't miss out on what's going on in the coming weeks and months ahead. So that was a lot of announcements, wasn't it? Is anybody tuned in tonight? I see we've got Scott from Fort Worth in the house tonight. Adam's watching from Arizona. Hi, Heather. Glad you could tune in tonight. Heather from Arizona is here. My friend Nancy from Montana. Thank you, Nancy, for being here as well. And Chuck from Texas. Hey, Chuck. Thanks for tuning in. I'm sure there'll be more people entering and not afraid to pop in the comments as we go. I see Tracy just popped in from Helena. Hey, Tracy. Glad you could watch tonight as well. So I do have a tidbit of the week tonight that I want to share with you guys. And this week's tidbit is called Fear of Missing Out. Have you ever heard of the fear of missing out? Maybe you see someone taking a class that you want to go to and you really want to be a part of it and you don't want to miss out on it. Or your friends are attending an event that you really don't want to miss. That's what you call fear of missing out. And I've heard it many times on social media. But I think instead of worrying about missing out on things others are doing, I think we should be more concerned about missing out on these things. How about missing out on living up to your full potential? How about fear of missing out on being the best spouse, mother, father, or friend that you can be? Or how about the fear of missing out on never knowing who God truly made you to be because you were too preoccupied with being comfortable and making excuses about why you can't do or be more? What a waste, right? That's what I fear missing out on. And today I mistakenly learned, at least in part, how to never miss out on any of that. I was in the middle of a workout today, coincidentally, and I walked into that workout not realizing how physically, mentally, and emotionally demanding and draining it would truly be. And God does this in our lives sometimes. He gives us what's called a curveball. And I certainly got one today. It's something that you didn't see coming and you have to adjust on the fly. How many of you have had a curveball in your life? For me, it was a workout on paper that looked very doable, but and nothing out of the ordinary. And I realized later that in reality, it would force me to face myself in ways that I did not want to realize. But ultimately, doing so was the biggest gift I could ever have received, all because I was willing to do the one thing I didn't want to do in the moment. And that was fully show up, face myself, and settle into something really uncomfortable. Admittedly, I thought of all kinds of ways to get out of it. Trust me, I thought of it all, guys. And I wanted to quit so bad, and it would have been so easy to cheat or give up. And it crossed my mind many times. But instead, I decided no matter how long it took me, I was going to finish. And soon I got mad. And after making that decision with no turning back, I reluctantly and with determination settled into the suck, as they say. And I stayed there for quite some time. And I wrestled with it and I fought it and I stared it right in the face. Even when I was scared that I couldn't do it, I did it anyway. And a really funny thing happened after a few minutes of really digging deep. It was almost as if I'd unlocked a new level of some kind. My resolve produced a level of presence that I rarely experienced during a workout, and it was almost as if time was no longer in play. Rather than fighting with the workout or fighting with myself or God or whoever, I just set my mind and I focused my energy on the next thing and then the next thing. And I just never stopped. And before I knew it, I was done. I'd finally conquered the mountain and I could finally rest. And the feeling of accomplishment was amazing, I have to tell you. But since I was by myself, I had an internal celebration. And that's a good thing because sometimes doing something by yourself and for yourself is a truly fulfilling win. Today, I had laid one more brick on the foundation of growing closer to who I believe I was created to be. Someone who is strong, both mentally and physically, someone who doesn't give up on herself easily when things get hard, and someone who can endure in the midst of doubt and struggle. These are the things I won't be missing out on. These are the things my family will see of me, and I hope inspires them to know that they can do more than they think they can as well. And I hope this inspires you, or else I wouldn't be sharing it with you. I hope that you do the things that scare you the most so that you'll never experience the fear of missing out on who you were meant to be. So, this is my encouragement for you tonight, my tidbit of the week, fear of missing out. I hope you enjoyed it. Mic drop. I'm leaving now. Adam can take over. All right, let's get into why you tuned in tonight, the real reason, and that is that is our interview with Kyle Schmidt. I'm so honored to have Kyle on with us tonight. It's going to be a good interview. I've been looking forward to it. Whew, I'm glad I got through that tidbit, guys. Okay, Kyle is a retired police officer of over 24 years with the Tempe, Arizona Police Department. There, he served as patrol officer, computer forensics detective, recruit training officer, patrol sergeant, and in addition to that, served 7 years as a member of the SWAT team. During his final 15 years of service, he was the primary firearms instructor in rifle, pistol, and shotgun for the department. In 1999, he began shooting competitively at a local police competition and was highly encouraged by the department instructors to continue. Although he did not place very well in his first match, he says, he was hooked and his interest/obsession with competitive shooting was born. Fortunately, living in Arizona, Kyle had access to one of the most active competitive shooting facilities in the world, the Rio Salado Sportsman's Club. Not a week goes by without numerous types of competitive shooting events taking place there. In fact, during most months, there are no less than 10 organized competitive shooting matches, and that is just pistol practice alone. During Kyle's competitive shooting experience, he has participated in several different competitive shooting disciplines, including USPSA, IDPA, NRA Action Pistol, NRA PPC, USPSA. I already said that. Oh, no, USPSA Multi-Gun, and NRA Bullseye. During his 25-year career, Kyle has earned multiple national championships as well as competing internationally with the great Rob Latham on Team USA in the World Action Pistol Championship in Germany in 2012, where his team earned a gold medal. Kyle also enjoys other sports such as trail running and is currently training to compete in a half marathon. Wow. Constantly pursuing excellence in his life personally and professionally, Kyle believes that whatever a person pursues in life, embracing responsibility for our own actions and holding ourselves accountable is key. And with that, we'll bring Kyle onto the show. Hey, Kyle.
Hi.
Hi. Thanks for coming on tonight.
Thanks for having me. Happy New Year. And that was a very inspirational monologue.
Oh, well, thank you. Yeah, that just happened today. And I thought, well, if I've got something to say that's inspirational, it usually is drawn from personal experience. And I thought that might be a good one to share.
Great.
That was a good one. Okay. So I want to touch on your background a little bit more here, but then I want to dive a little bit deeper into some practical strategies for people that are pursuing various things in their life. It might not be shooting, competitively, but whatever it is they're pursuing, because I think that there's a common thread that goes through all excellence, right? And it seems as though too there might be certain types of people that lean more towards that self-improvement track, I guess you'd say, in the pursuit of excellence. So I want to dig into that. But first, what I find most interesting about you're a competitive shooter. You've been handling guns for a very long time, former police officer, but you don't consider yourself a gun guy. Well, explain that to us.
Well, I'd say that comes from a couple friends of mine who are really gun guys. They jokingly say that I'm just a shooter. I'm not a gun guy. There's a lot of guys who I admire a lot that know everything about every gun that's ever been created and what springs are used for this and who developed it. And it's very impressive knowledge that they have. Me, I look at the guns are more like a tool for me, whether it's for self-defense or in most cases for me is how can I use this tool to improve my performance for this specific shooting discipline?
That makes sense because I'm not a gun geek either. I'm very fond of my particular guns that I have, but for the most part, I don't know. I don't think I would call myself a gun geek like others, but I know many friends that are that way. So I'm curious then too, if you're not a gun guy and kind of leading into the like next segment then would be your law enforcement career. What brought you into law enforcement? I think that that's quite a lengthy career, and you were a firearms instructor for a large portion of that.
Sure, sure. So my dad was a police officer in a neighboring city, Chandler, and as I was going through high school and early 20s, I was always trying to find a job. I had several different jobs, but I was always trying to find something that gave me some kind of I don't know sense of pride or satisfaction. And I
Mm,
watched what my dad did, and I was kind of proud of what he did. And I go, I'm gonna try my hand in that. He obviously, like most cops, most parents, try to discourage me from that due to dangers and things like that they don't want to
yeah.
happen to their children. But I pursued it anyway, and I'm glad I did. It was a wonderful career.
You mentioned when we talked earlier that you actually enjoy finding what you're not good at. I most people say they try to find what they are good at and they pursue that.
Yeah,
So
let me
what's
give you
that all about?
little context. You and I had a conversation earlier, and I mentioned my brother. My brother is a phenomenal athlete. He's great at basketball and football. Great at all kinds of things. Very athletic. And he made a comment to me one time. And he said, "Hey, you know what? I was trying to teach him how to water ski, by the way, and he was struggling with it.
Uh-huh.
This a wonderful athlete just couldn't get up on the water skis. And he said, I've tried it 3 or 4 times. I'm done. And I go, really? You're quitting already? He goes, yeah, I've pretty much come to the conclusion that I'll try something a few times. That if I'm not immediately good at it, I'm never going to do it again.
Wow.
I thought about it a while, and there is some good logic to it. Don't get me wrong, but it's almost opposite of my personality. If I try something and I'm immediately good at it, I'm not really that interested anymore. I'm constantly looking for something that I can be challenged by, that I can try to find some level of improvement, learn how to practice it better.
Wait. So if
Intriguing.
that's a true statement, then that means you don't think that you're a great shooter yet. Is that
That is
true?
correct. That is very true. Very true. Because I'm constantly around people that I would consider to be great shooters, and I certainly don't hold myself in the same realm of skill that those guys are in.
You're very humble, Kyle.
Thank you.
I think maybe too humble because your classification is either master or expert, I believe, in all of those disciplines. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's different classifications for different shooting disciplines. I'm
Mm-hmm.
classified as a master in most of the shooting disciplines that I participate in, but not in all of them. And certainly, there's a grandmaster level, which is above where I'm at. That is certainly I'm trying to aspire to achieve, of course.
Sure. And then once you reach that, then
I got to get better at that. It's a never-ending process, right? There's always some
I
kind
was
of
just
continuous
testing you there.
improvement
I
going
wanted to
on.
see what you would say. Okay, so let's get into how you got into competitive shooting because I think this is really interesting. So, you were encouraged by fellow law enforcement to get into competitive shooting. Now, what kind of a shooter would you like, say you were back then when you first began versus
Um,
how you are now?
I would say if I were to define what type of shooter I'd be, I'd say I would be safe and relatively, I don't say it, and it sounds like a negative word, but I'm going to say incompetent compared to how my shooting skill is now. But I
Mhm.
was safe. I wasn't
Mhm.
very proficient.
Right.
Um, the person that encouraged me to do this was the sergeant in the firearms training unit at the time. His name was Craig Stapp. He helped run this match or a stage in this match. It was at Phoenix Police Department Academy, and they ran a thing called the Combat Classic every year, and it was just for law enforcement, mostly Arizona, but people would travel from other states to shoot the match. And it had a variety of different shooting tests in this match. So he asked me to come out and help him run the stage, but also encouraged me to shoot the match. He was a really good USPSA shooter, really good shooter in general. Back then in the mid 90s, not a lot of people were shooting any Glocks in competition. He was a
Mm.
grandmaster shooter shooting a Glock, and it was kind of unheard of back then. He
Mhm.
was he was really proficient, so he encouraged me to go out and do it. And like you mentioned in the intro, it's I was not very good for sure. I didn't get disqualified or do anything unsafe, but my performance
Yeah.
was lacking compared to the other people that I was shooting against, and where my skill is now. But I really enjoyed it. Like we talked about, it was something that was challenging for me on
Yeah.
several different levels. So I kind of got hooked on it.
Yeah, you talked about being hooked on it, and I think it's more than just being hooked on it to have as long of a career as you've had in competitive shooting. So what is it specifically about competitive shooting that has kept you hooked this long?
I can't quite figure it out. There's so many different components to it that make it challenging. I will
Yeah.
also mention that there was a point in time where I was doing it because I wanted to be better and shoot a better score on my qualification at work, right? It started out as I wanted to be better at just my job,
Mhm.
the regular police officer performance stuff. Then I was on the SWAT team and I wanted to try to catch up to those guys who'd been on the SWAT team a lot better. They were much more proficient than I was. And then it came to a point where I enjoyed the competitive portion of it. And then I saw the value in that when I became a firearms instructor. And then I wanted to continue to do it because I'm trying to develop my skill. So that was easier for me to translate that information to the people that I'm trying to instruct. Right. So it all
Right.
kind of came into a big circle of I like things that was enjoyable for me and challenging for me, but there was a component of I was taking back to work and trying to help other people with it.
And how did that apply to your law enforcement career? I mean, obviously, I think it probably helped quite a bit, but what specifically did you learn from competitive shooting that you applied in your career?
Well, there's just so many aspects. Anytime you're trying to achieve a high level of performance in anything, right? There's going to
Mm-hmm.
be lots of successes and failures, just
Mm-hmm.
like everything else in life, right? You're going to try stuff out. You're not going to do well at it. Just like the workout you talked about earlier in
Yeah.
your monologue, right? You're
Yeah.
struggling at it, but you know that you're going to fail at some part. You're going to succeed in some parts, and you're going to grow and look back on it and
Mm-hmm.
be a better, stronger person at the end. So I do think that there's a lot of components to improving performance in whatever discipline. My case, shooting or running, like you talked about before, any of
Mm-hmm.
that stuff. All those things that help you be successful in one arena are mostly translatable into another work environment.
Yeah, really, I think it doesn't matter what kind of a high performer you are in what industry or category. It all overlaps because it's all the same thing. So when I'm talking about working out or whatever the thing is, it's not about the thing you're doing. It's about the really about developing that mental fortitude. You are developing physically as well, but it's almost more the mental than the physical. And have learned that it seems as though the hardest things in the world to do are mostly a large percentage mental and not physical or skill. Does that make sense to
Yes,
you?
I definitely think there's a mental component to most everything,
Yeah.
but it's a fine line. With I hear people say all the time, and mostly from the law enforcement community, like, "Hey, shooting is 90% mental." I don't know if you've ever heard that before,
Mhm.
but I joke that it's only 90% mental when you're getting to the part where you're a top performer.
Mhm.
Otherwise, you need to develop the physical skills. Because I joke that I can't lay the gun on a table, kind of point it at the
Mhm.
target, and then get the hits 90% of the time just by having strong mental discipline, right? I actually
Right.
physically need to do things to fire the gun.
Right.
Um,
Well,
so
that
I do.
ties into your unconscious competence that you mentioned earlier, the phases.
Sure, sure. That is the stages of competence in general, right? The
Right.
first, you want to go through those, or do you? Are
Yeah.
you
Yeah, go
okay?
ahead.
The first one is called unconscious incompetence, and that's kind of where I was at when I shot that first match. Right, I went through the police academy and I learned how to shoot, and okay, I got this figured out. I can pass the police qualification, so therefore I am good enough, right? But as I started to develop skill, I realized that I just didn't even know about the stuff that I didn't even know about yet. So I was
Yeah.
unconscious about my incompetence. It sounds
Right.
kind of like a double play on words, but right. So then, as time goes on, you start to become consciously incompetent. So now, oh shoot, I realize that I'm not very competent at this, like I thought I was. Then
Mhm.
over time, as you practice and you get better and get better, then you can be consciously competent, right? So I have to think my way through the steps, and I can achieve competency, but takes me a lot of mental effort. I'm thinking my way through the process, and then eventually, what we're trying to develop is unconscious competence, right? I want
Mhm.
to be able to perform these actions without the need for conscious thought. I've kind of pre-programmed that in there. I can just call a routine up in my brain and say, okay, I want to go to this routine, and it knows how to perform those actions.
And that gives you more bandwidth then to be able to think through things, i.e. the mental side of it, right, of
Sure,
competition,
sure.
or that having so much unconscious competence as a police officer that you can make good decisions in the moment without having to think about reloading your gun or whatever the thing is you have to do with your gun, right?
Right. Well, that's not only just reloading the gun, it's making decisions about what the suspects or the people in the surrounding area are doing. Is it safe? Do I need to change positions? Is this really
Mhm.
a threat? Is it not a threat?
Mhm.
It's constantly changing. So if my brain is so engaged with the physical movements of drawing the gun and whatever it is that you're doing, then it's not going to have, like you said, the bandwidth in order for me to look down range and see what's going on. What is the suspect doing? Is that a threat? Are
Right.
they endangering me or somebody else? Like, what do I need to do to stop that? Where's my cover? A million different things can go through your mind, but if you're stuck in the loop of just thinking about the mental, I'm sorry, motor skills component of it, right?
Mhm.
Then you lose track of the cognitive stuff that you need to perform, make decisions about.
Exactly. Yeah, and that applies to concealed carriers as well. It's
Absolutely.
yeah, definitely. Good. Okay, where am I going with this?
Sorry, I get off track real easy.
Oh, here's Adam.
So Al, I want to jump in here for a second. And by the way, it's a humbling honor to have you here. I mean, I got to spend some time shooting with you in the last 4 years, and just wow, amazing. So
Very
so
nice of
anyways,
you to
you were
say that.
talking
I'm
about
honored to be
you
here.
know,
And
as a cop, you went into the competitive world. Well, it's truly it's our honor. Anyways, as a cop, right? I mean, most of us cops, and I'd say a lot of civilians too, we tend to shy away from the competitive side. I shied away as a cop that I just thought, well, that's going to get you killed in the streets, right? It's not tactical, it's not tactical, it's not anything. But I've come to the realization, and this is something I think I heard you say about 4 years or so ago, that shooting is shooting, right? 80-90% of it all crosses across all domains. It's just shooting. Is from your perspective, is this something you would encourage far more gun owners to do, whether they're cops or not, the concealed carry holder, go to competitions and just spend time learning to competitively shoot? Because I think that grows your skill, but is that something you'd highly recommend for everybody who owns a gun, basically?
I would say so, but I would say that first they need to be calm. Like, remember, we did mention earlier that I was able to be safe with the gun first. So you have to
Yeah.
develop some fundamental skills on being able to move around the range safely, because they do ask you to do a lot of very difficult things, in my opinion, right? I've heard this from somebody else in the past, and I'm going to steal it, is the shots that you face in a competitive shooting match are generally more difficult than any shot you face in a gunfight. Now, the consequences for failure are not the same, but in the shooting match, they're constantly trying to find ways to challenge you, to make things as difficult as they can, to see if you can perform under those conditions or make those shots or make it in this time limit or whatever the criteria is. So I definitely would encourage people to go out. And even if you're hesitant about shooting, which I think eventually you'll be comfortable with shooting the matches, but at least go out and watch and see what's happening on the mat in those matches. What you think is going on in a shooting match may not actually be what's going on. And like we mentioned earlier, there's so many different disciplines, shooting disciplines, just pistol shooting disciplines, that there's something out there for everybody that's interesting and challenging for everybody.
So, okay, agreed, right? Get the safety down first, right? And you can do that through some good training and some thought. But from that point forward, I fully agree with you, right? That cognitive overload at first, especially when you're new, of competitive, it just forces you to one, slow down and be more thoughtful about things until it becomes automated. And then you can now focus on the shooting side. I just found for me that, I went into that thinking, okay, cop, I'm a solid shooter, whatever. And man, when I started competing, man, the wheels came off the bus. And I suddenly learned I didn't know nearly as much as I thought. And here I am, I'm a pretty decent shooter. And that was, in fact, the first time I met you. That was my first foray into competitive shooting. It seemed to me like the growth in skill was leaps and bounds in the competitive time that I've done. And if you can get somebody to be safe and then put fear, or could we even say ego, or just hesitation aside to go to these things, even just once a month, it would, I think, in the shooting world would change. I think it would change us, the entire shooting world, if we could get even just a small fraction of us gun owners to do that.
And
Sure.
let's not forget, it is a blast to do a match, in my opinion. At least the ones I've attended. The ones I've attended have been full of, for the most part, very helpful, kind people, and it's really like it's a social thing too.
Sure.
You're being around like-minded people. They're all trying to, be competitive, and that's fun. Competition should be fun. And so, what a better way to improve your skills than to go, on a weekend, have fun with some friends, or even if you don't know them, you'll make new ones, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, I was really appreciative how you brought up the reasons for it, the need for it, and I just thought that was so good. And I just, anything I can to push people into more, not just training, but betterment of themselves and carrying this highly litigious, high risk device, a gun. I think the better off we are as a community. So I appreciated you saying that.
I definitely agree with you. I also think that over the years that I've been involved in this a little bit, I think people get to that place I don't want to say on their own. Sometimes they need some encouragement, but sometimes they need just little steps. Like I said, just going out to the range and watch what's going on with the different
Mhm.
shooting matches. Take that first step of trying to understand what the expectations are of the match performance before you just jump in and show up at a match. That way, hey, this is the kind of gear that I need. This is the kind of skill level that I need. And don't
Why are you
expect that when you
laughing?
show up, you're going to be able to beat everybody. You show up and you're going to have to go through the same thing that Adam and I did. Is you're going to fail a lot and you're gonna
Yeah.
have to figure stuff out as you go. Well, I probably
That's why
failed
you
more than
can't
you did,
take it too seriously in the beginning.
but
Because
right,
if you take yourself too seriously in the beginning, you'll quit.
right.
So you almost made me laugh there, kind of did, because you said, start out slow and easy. And I was dumb, right? My very first match was a regional championship competing against Kyle Schmidt, and I knew nothing of what I was doing, and I did it the wrong way. So everybody else listen to Kyle.
That sounds like Adam. Yeah.
All right, I'll leave you alone. See you.
Thank you.
Oh, geez. That's so funny. Okay, so let's move into some practical strategies for anyone at any level involving achieving excellence of any kind in their lives. Are there any practical strategies that you've used throughout your career that you think could help somebody watching tonight?
Oh, there's so many, and I will say that it's not something that I make up. I get little different pieces from different people that I aspire to be more like, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I heard was I'm trying to remember who said it. It's called the WIN principle. I don't know if you've heard that before. WIN. So what's important now? And I kind of use that for a lot of things in my life, not just shooting, but shooting is definitely, or developing skill, like you mentioned earlier, is something I use that a lot for. What's the most important thing that I need to be working on now? What happens is most of us, because it's easier and more enjoyable, we do a lot of implicit learning, right? We show up at the match and then we shoot the match. Somebody else set it up. We get done. We were safely completed the match and we're done. There is some learning that occurs that way, but it's implicit learning, right? You just kind of learn over time and you get a little bit better here and there, but you don't really make these leaps and bounds until you do something called deliberate practice, right? Okay, today I'm going to work on pick something. I'm draw. I'm going to work on learning how to draw the gun more efficiently, right? And then the next time, maybe it's a reload. Maybe it's getting the gun back on target faster. Maybe it's being able to shoot a group. There's so many different components to shooting that are important. You can pick one and work on that one for a little bit. That's the one that's the most important for me right now. And if things go well, let's just say you've got all these skills and they're evenly balanced, right? And then you get a little bit better at the draw, but now your reloads are not as good. So you spend some time working on the reloads and they're a little bit better than the draw and then the accuracy. It's this constant process of getting a little bit better in each thing. And ultimately, you bring all those things together and you test them in the match. And the match is to see, hey, what stuff have I identified in this match that I struggled with that is the most important thing for me to work on now?
That's really good because unfortunately, I think a lot of people only work on the things they enjoy doing,
Right?
the things they're already strong at. Am
It's
I
so much
right?
more fun.
Right, it is more fun. But it doesn't help you to be more well-rounded as a competitor or whatever it is that you're trying to do.
Right.
So, would you say then for those weaknesses that we all have, would a good strategy be to put those into little bite-sized pieces then so they're not quite so overwhelming?
Sure. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And I would say everything depends on your ability to pay attention to things, right? We've heard all these different things about how this person's a kinesthetic learner, they're a visual learner, they're an auditory learner. Well, the reality is you're whatever you can pay attention to learner. So if you can stay engaged in a process, if you want to go out and work on one specific shooting skill for a little while, you should, and you should you should do that as long as you're still able to pay attention and be engaged in that. And then when you're not being able to be engaged in that anymore, make a game out of it. Have some stuff with your friends. I think those are the most productive times for me is we go work on something with some of my friends and then we make a little bit of a game about it. Rob's really good about that. He can turn any challenge into some kind of game he can beat you at. He doesn't do it like that. It just seems to be the way it turns out all the time.
And that keeps it more interesting.
Right. And then you don't just have this, okay, I'm just going to go out here and go through this grind of this one deliberate practice routine. You do some deliberate practice on this, maybe something else, and you kind of combine stuff together and make something fun out of it.
So what do you do in dry fire to keep things fun, so to speak, because I find dry fire to be very dry.
Well,
Any tips on that?
I'm gonna use another Rob quote here. Is the best dry fire is done on the range with live ammunition,
Hmm.
which I think is pretty funny. But dry firing, I think, does a lot for developing gun handling skills. Right, it's very difficult to learn how to be more accurate or faster with dry fire from a shooting perspective. Right, you can be faster from a manipulation standpoint with dry practice. So same thing. I try to find something that is challenging. Right, they talk about in a lot of learning books about reaching. Right, you have to find something that you're reaching to achieve that's just outside of what you can do, but not so far outside of it that it's overwhelming and discouraging. You don't even want to try it. Right. So,
Okay.
for example, I mentioned the draw earlier because it's the easiest one for people to visualize. If today I wake up and my draw and I can easily draw the gun in a second and a half and aim it at a spot on whatever I dry practice on, the safe background that I dry practice on, and maybe I do it in a second and a half. Well, then maybe my goal is to try to do that 5 times in a row at 1.4 seconds or whatever that goal is. That you can do it maybe occasionally, but you're trying to be able to do it more consistently.
So that's you kind of turning it into a game, I guess.
Yeah,
Sort
I
of.
guess it
You
is.
can kind of make that into a
Sure.
game.
Right.
Okay. Okay. So what do you think it is? I talked about this in my tidbit about, reaching your full potential. What do you think that really holds people back
Mm.
from, really reaching their full potential? And what advice would you give to someone who's struggling?
I'll give you a reality answer and I'll give you a philosophical answer. The
Okay.
philosophical answer, I think Adam hit on, and that is apprehension or failure or fear of failure, we'll even say, right?
Yeah.
Both of those work. Because sometimes people don't want to get involved in something because they're afraid that they're going to fail, right? But the reality is that failures are the things that happen that help us grow, right? Which I just mentioned, I go shoot a match and I find the things that I can improve on that would be most beneficial for me to improve on, right? I essentially failed at doing those the way that I wanted to. So you
Hmm.
identify those and you move on and you try to create some improvement and you get better based on those failures. So is daunting as the word failure is, and as much as people try to avoid it, the reality is in order for us to improve on anything, we're going to have to fail at some point.
That's true.
I can't remember the exact quote, but Colin Powell had a quote, something to the effect of success is made, I'm going to butcher this, success is made up of hard work, um, preparation, and learning from failure, or something to that effect, right?
Hmm.
And that's interesting that he throws that learning from failure into
Hmm.
that component with the preparation and the hard work component. It's really important. So I
It
think a lot
is.
of people miss out on that.
I think so too. And I technically, by the way, guys, I technically failed that workout because that workout had a time limit on it. And the first round I made the time limit, but the other 2 rounds I didn't. It was all I could do to just finish it all. So in one way I failed, but in another way I won
Right, exactly.
because I guess I chose to look at it that way rather than just saying, well, I failed because I didn't make the time that I wanted to.
Right,
But yeah, I finished it and most people would have quit.
right. And are you
So,
stronger now and more prepared to do it tomorrow?
well, maybe.
Mentally and physically, right? If that workout was
Maybe
difficult,
mentally.
yeah, it's a reach. You're reaching for something, and
Right.
sometimes those don't happen overnight. Sometimes that takes a long time. I'm going to throw
Yeah.
out another quote, and I'm going to butcher. I think it was Steve Jobs that said something to the effect of, "It's amazing how many overnight successes take years to develop."
Oh, so true.
You know,
So true.
something like that. Again, I'm butchering that,
Yeah.
but it's a good
And we
concept.
talked about that the other day too about the highlight reels on Instagram are not the hard work behind the scenes. All you're
Right,
seeing is what Steve Jobs says. You're just seeing the end result. You're not seeing what it took to get there. And if you're not patient in doing those steps along the way and being consistent with those steps, you cannot expect to achieve excellence because you haven't put the work in. It
right,
can't be an overnight thing. And I
right,
think we're so impatient sometimes. I mean, I can relate to this
right.
myself. I'm an impatient person. As I've gotten older and matured a little bit more, I've been able to rein that in and understand that there's really an appreciation in something taking longer to fulfill, because it's so much more rewarding that way than just a short-term fix, so to speak.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah.
Achieving those small little goals along the way, and ultimately you're able to accomplish the big goal.
Right, and you're not gonna see the progress. Like you said, "Well, you'll be stronger tomorrow." Well, maybe I will be a little stronger, but I don't know. It's gonna be a while before I actually see more strength, but you have to be okay with that, and you just have to know that over time, things will improve, and you don't have to see the progress right then and there. So, you have to get some kind of fulfillment after just going through it and surviving at this point, right?
Right. Well, I think what you talked about earlier, there's like an internal feeling of accomplishment, right? Some people
Yeah.
have that, they want to just accomplish things for their own personal satisfaction, and some
Mhm.
people want to accomplish things because they want other people to praise them or recognize that they accomplished it.
Yeah.
I don't know that which one's better or worse. I'm more of an internal accomplishment kind of person.
Mhm.
I don't particularly like Adam, you and Adam say nice things about me, and it's almost embarrassing for me. I appreciate saying it, but it's hard to accept, if you know what I
You
mean.
have a hard time taking compliments, that's
There
for
you go.
sure.
I have a hard
Yeah.
time saying that as well.
Yeah, it's okay.
Thank
Well,
you.
the other thing too that builds in those moments when you're by yourself and you're doing those hard things is, I think, your personal integrity, because only you and God really know if you cheated on that thing, or if you fudged on that thing, or if you didn't quite put in what you were supposed to, right? But the more that you damage your own personal integrity because you know what you did and who you are, then the less you're going to show up for yourself later, right? And you're going to lie to yourself about things. It's about really being honest with yourself and holding yourself accountable. And you have to have a lot of that in dry fire, right? You have to have a lot of accountability and honesty with that, or else it's not going to translate to the range.
Sure. I agree.
Definitely. Okay. I got off on a tangent there. Um, okay. So you said that in our conversation, we talked about pursuing excellence and how sometimes there's a danger in that. So it's really cool to be a high achiever, high performer, going after things, sometimes being obsessed with those things, but sometimes there's a downside to that too. So
Sure.
could you speak to that in your
Yeah. So
personal experience?
I will say some of it's my personal experience, and some of it is experiences that where I've watched what other people have gone through. I think if you want to be a top performer in anything, it doesn't necessarily have to be in some kind of athletic endeavor. You want to be the CEO of a company or something like that. You always have to sacrifice something. You always have to give something up to get something else. So if you want to be the highest top performer in whatever discipline you're doing, you're going to have to add more time to practicing or performing to improve your performance that way, which means you're going to have to take time away from something else. So
Mhm.
it's less time. I don't know, whatever your other things that you like to do, spend time with your family is a good one, right? A lot of
Mhm.
times family time suffers because you're trying to do something to improve your performance. So and it could be hanging out with your friends. It could be watching TV shows, whatever it is that you like to do outside of trying to accomplish your goal, right? You have to give something up. You have to balance it out. And I don't have a right answer for it's 50% family, 50% personal. There's not really anything where it's totally different for each individual person. But
Mhm.
that's what I think is the most challenging thing is learning to balance out your life with your aspirations, you know?
Yeah, that's really hard sometimes, especially when you're super passionate about something. And um, Adam and I have had this conversation about how in our culture we hear the word balance a lot, right? And while I do agree that balance is a good thing, as a super passionate person, sometimes balance is really hard to come by. And sometimes I almost think it's impossible when you're on a narrow focused track of pursuing something. And that's something that I've had to try to work on throughout my life as well. And I really haven't decided yet whether or not that's necessarily a bad thing. Some would say that it is, and I haven't made up my mind about that. The jury's still out. I don't know if Adam has anything to add to that, but
Well, there's no
um,
right answer. It's whatever works for you in your
right,
family, in your situation, right?
right, yeah, yeah. but yeah, I don't know if I don't really look at my life as balancing it. I look at it as juggling it. Look at it
Sure.
as plates in the air constantly, and sometimes I have to give more attention to this or more attention to that, and that's just part of the struggle in all of our lives and everything that we do. And it doesn't matter if it's competition or if it's everyday work or family life or whatever. So let's see. Let's end on well, not let's not end on this, but I do want to talk about your training with your half marathon. So do you
Another
consider
obsession.
yourself yeah, another obsession. Is this a new thing? And are you approaching this the same way you did with your shooting?
I would say so. It's a new thing. This is the first time I've ever run a race.
Is
I
it
was like
really?
trail running and hanging out and mountain biking
Wait,
and things like that, just as a fun thing to do.
you're
But this is
starting with a half marathon?
well, sure. Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
I actually signed up for a half trail marathon first, and then I go, well, maybe I should do like a road one first. So I've got the road one in a week or two, and then the trail one in April.
But wait, so you haven't been a competitive runner, and
Correct.
in 2 weeks you're gonna do a half marathon.
Well, no. I've been running for many years. I've just
Oh,
never
you
run a race
have.
before. Yes, yes,
Okay, okay, that makes more sense now.
yes.
So
So this
how
is the
long
first
does
time that
it
I've gone through any type of training program. Have a couple different resources through either my watch or some online things that I've gotten a hold of to actually set up a training program. And as I go through this training program, I go, wow, this is very similar to the types of training concepts that I would do when I'm shooting or when I'm trying to learn how to ride my mountain bike or whatever. Or
in
I'd
what
probably
way?
say it when I'm learning more to crash my mountain bike is what he says. But
How is it similar? Do they chunk it up
sure,
and
yeah. So
smaller okay.
they have like easy days and hard days and long days and interval workouts and speed things. There's all these different diverse things. And one of the things that I learned from it is a good chunk of the workout is not necessarily a really hard workout. It's just going through the motions and getting some practice in at a
Hmm.
less intense pace, if you will. Right. So you're still getting some structural experience. You're putting miles on your legs, but you're not wearing them out. So that way they have more time to recover for the next hard workout. And then ultimately it builds up. So I can
Hmm.
relate that to today, we're just going to shoot groups, right? That's a long, easy run. And then the next day we're going to shoot some stuff where we're going to just work on some gun handling stuff. And the next day we're going to learn how to recover the gun back on the target really fast. And the next day we're going to combine all those things together, right? There's these different little skill chunks, to use your word from earlier, that we
Hmm.
can take for each individual overall performance, chunk them out, and then eventually put them back together and make something hopefully that was greater than it was before.
It's all the same.
It is. It's very similar.
That's so cool. So literally anything you want to do in life, you can use the same approach to some degree
Yeah.
and get better.
And there's a lot of actually, I like to when I'm riding my mountain bike or trail running, not so much right now when I'm doing the road running thing. I like to listen to audiobooks, and there's a lot of learning audiobooks out there about different ways that people learn. A lot of it's
Hmm.
cognitive based, but there is a lot of stuff that you can take from these people that have studied how people learn and take those and apply them to whatever it is that you're trying to improve on.
Do you
Whatever your
remember any of the titles of those or your
sure, like
favorite?
there's one Make It Stick. There's one called in fact, I get it right here. If you don't mind me pulling up my phone,
No,
I
I
can
don't
look at
mind. I'm
my
interested to know.
library here real quick and
Make
give you
it
a couple of
stick, you
them.
said?
Make It Stick is a good one. It's a little on the deeper side. From a cognitive standpoint, there's a book called Thinking Fast and Slow that has a
Hmm.
lot of information about decision making that I've really found to be helpful. Um, Make It Stick. That's Peter Brown. Let's see here. Peak is a performance thing. Talent is overrated. Building a better brain. Let's see.
You
Oh,
listen to a lot of these.
I have a lot of time sometimes. And my new job, I'm a rep for some different shooting manufacturers for all the agencies. So I have a lot of time. I'm driving back and forth to
Oh,
places, on the
Yeah.
road for many hours. But a lot of this stuff I read just trying to improve my ability to be an instructor for the police department.
Hmm.
There's a book, it's more of like a textbook thing called Motor Learning and Control. And they talk about the things that I talked about earlier with what's the difference between a motor skill and a cognitive skill, and how do you actually measure a skilled performance, and things like that, I think are important. If we're trying to figure out how to improve performance, well, we should figure out how we're measuring that performance.
Right.
One's called the Talent Code, the Little Book of
Oh, wow.
Talent. Those are good. Science of Self-Learning, Science of Accelerated Learning. I mean, there's just so many. You can just do a quick search for, self-help, and there's just so many good things. As I
That's
read through
awesome.
my list, I'm like, I got to read that one again. I got to listen to that one again.
That's really good. That's good information. I wrote a bunch of that down. So a lot of that was stuff I'd never heard of. And look what's behind Adam, and that was not planned.
So, Kyle, this
Talent
wasn't
Code, there you
planned, but
go.
this right here is the talent code,
That's a good
right?
one.
This one right here. So, if folks want to look for something good besides the books he named, because those I'm going to go look. I've only heard of 2 of those, but this is a good one too. The talent
Yeah.
code.
That's a great one to start one, because they do a good job. It's more of like a storytelling thing about this guy's experience going to these different, places where they develop high performers. That's a good one.
Awesome. So is there anything you want to leave us with, Kyle, before we go? We're almost to the end of the hour. Anything that maybe we didn't cover, you want to leave our audience with to help people out there that are watching, or any piece
Um,
of advice?
I think the stuff maybe to kind of sum up with some of the stuff that we talked about, I think that was really enlightening or important. Don't be afraid to go out and get involved in stuff. Don't feel like that you have to avoid it because you're afraid you might fail at it. This
Mhm.
stuff is really important. Whatever your motivation for shooting is, whether it's for self-defense, learning how to be a better shooter, learning how to improve performance for yourself, winning a match, whatever it is, go out there, get started on it, start trying to chip away at the little things here and there to improve your performance. And like Abby mentioned, maybe get some good coaching.
Mhm.
Try to find somebody that you trust, and like you mentioned, even get people at the range are always helpful. They want to help you. They want you to be out there participating safely, and it's not like I thought it was going to be, where you're going to go out there and people are going to be cutthroat and they're trying to get a better. They're trying to get every little edge they can to be better than you. It's not like
Mhm.
that. Everybody
No.
wants you to shoot well. They just want to shoot better than you.
Yeah,
But
that's
they
true.
want
They
you to
do.
do well. They don't want you to fail at it.
Right, right. Well, that's what you call friendly competition.
Right.
And everyone needs some friendly competition. And I think it's so important that people aren't afraid to reach out to, people they trust, or just go and watch for the first time. You don't have to compete the very first time, and just get a lay of the land. That might be a good way to start as well. So that's really good advice, Kyle. Oh, hey, Adam.
Hey, Kyle, can I jump in and ask a question that's just been burning on my head? Right,
Okay.
you've survived one of the toughest professions in the world, law enforcement, for a long time, and cops. When we retire, cops tend to be dead in 5 years. Right, that's just the stat. You retire, you're dead in 5 years. I've noticed since the moment I met you, and it's obvious as I've spent time around you, and even here tonight, you're very even keeled. It seems like you're very happy in your life, and that you're dealing with retirement well compared to many of the cops that I've seen as they've retired, and since they lost their identity, whatever else. Here's the question. For those who are leaving a profession that oftentimes we in America make our profession our identity, can you talk about how you seem to have dealt with that so well, and I think that's so instructive. Do you mind giving us kind of your thoughts and your philosophy of, you're obviously exemplifying it, and I'd love to just hear what your thoughts are.
Sure. Again, I can only give you my opinion or my experiences, right? I can't tell you what's right, but I have never, I was very proud and I loved my job, but I never made that my life about that profession, right? A lot of people do, and that works for their family and for them. I've always had something else going on. When my kids were little, my kids were into sports. My focus was I wanted to do well at my job and work, give 100% as much as I could while I was there. But when I wasn't at the job, I want to be at their baseball practice or their volleyball practice or whatever it is that they were into at the time. What's my wife doing? What kind of events can I do to spend some time with my wife, right? So I try to find all these different things that help me grow that were outside of my law enforcement family. I think that's important for me, right? That worked good for me. Another thing you mentioned about people not doing well in retirement that I think is, I got from a TV show recently. I heard a doctor say, people don't stop moving because they get old. People get old because they stop moving, right? I don't know how much truth there is to that, but I really like it. And I feel like that's something that I probably overdo, right? I'm trying to always find something to accomplish, so I don't feel like I am stagnant. Sometimes I feel overwhelmed, like many of us do, but I'm not just sitting around going, gosh, I don't know what I'm going to do today. There's always, the day's full of stuff. I can find all kinds of stuff to either learn or do or fix. And if I can't, my wife can certainly find stuff for me to
do. We're so good at that.
And that seems like that translates. It's not just law enforcement. That translates across anything, right? Is our lives change and move and we go into the different stages of life to where it takes our attention, or at least our focus, to different areas. It seems to me that finding contentment and peace within those times and not being retroactive in our viewpoint is part of the key to happiness. And as I've watched you kind of from up close, but from a distance, that's something
I just creepy there a minute ago. So
I know I did, but that's something I've noticed, and I don't see a ton of people doing that. And I just thought that was admirable, and it just felt like we could pull some wisdom here from you.
He seems so well adjusted, Adam.
Yeah.
That's nice of you to say. Thank you.
All right, great. Okay, well, I don't see any questions in the comments unless I missed something. I don't think I did. So we're going to wrap it up for tonight. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight. It was a true pleasure having you on. A lot of fun. And you gave us some really, really good advice and some clear strategies we can put into place in our own lives. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you very much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
You bet. All right, so let's move on to what you can expect for next week, and a quick announcement before I do that. So I just want to thank all of you guys who support me on the locals.com channel. That's a private channel for Defenders Live for paid subscribers only. You can go there and find exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else. And one of the things that you can find there is our Defenders Uncensored series. And we're going to be posting another one of those very soon because we've got one coming up on Friday. So you can be looking for that. I also have the early release of the interview that I did with Lisa Stiers of PacWest Defense. And the title of that one is called The Truth About Domestic Violence. Lisa shares a very powerful story about her life and how she's using her experiences to help others. It's a really good one that you won't want to miss. So go to locals.com. Go to the Discover tab and search Defenders Live to find us over there. Also, mark your calendars for January 31st. I'm going to be having the great Neil Widener on from Active Self-Protection, and we're going to be doing something a little bit different on the show that night. As of right now, we're calling it 7 at 7. And the reason for that is because Neil is going to be asking me 7 random questions. I'll be asking him 7 random questions, all at 7 p.m. Mountain Time. So that's the reason for the title, although I think I can come up with a better one before the time rolls around. So that's going to be January 31st, and I have no idea what he's going to ask me. And I'm honestly a little bit scared, but I'm going to do it anyway. You can tune into that on the regular channels that you see me on, or if you're a part of the Active Self-Protection app, it will be on there as well. And if you want to download that app for 30% off for the first 3 months, you can go to watch.activeselfprotection.com, put in the Defenders 30 code at checkout. You'll get your first 3 months 30% off. Yes. And if you have any questions, some clever questions I can ask Neil Widener, you should email those to me at laura@defenders-usa.com, because I'm going to need help on that. In that area. That's going to be a fun episode. I'm looking forward to that. And next week, we're going to have Ryan Luca on. Ryan is the founder and executive director of Impact Montana. Ryan devoted 21 years of his life to serving our country in the military, and has struggled with mental health issues, anger, and chronic pain and fatigue since his last deployment overseas. After retiring in 2020, he now devotes his time to helping others find peace in the midst of chaos by bringing together assessment, training, coaching, and mentoring to help Montana service members, veterans, and first responders and their families thrive. So you won't want to miss this great interview next week with Ryan Luca of Impact Montana. That'll be next Wednesday at 7 p.m. Mountain Standard Time. Looking forward to seeing all of you again next week. Until then, take care.